What is up, YouTube? And today let's just talk about Immortal Wukong. And that's because he's a new unit. He is a Earth Warrior, not limited, so he's actually available from the regular Covenant pool, as well as the Elemental Summons, meaning that he's not a super high priority to get. But we're going to be talking about what I actually think about him after testing him out extensively in PvP and PvE, if you really need him, and if he's actually worth summoning for after everyone has been testing it. So basically, pretty good unit for PvE. They kind of wanted to make him a PvP unit by having him actually counter Genua. And that is because basically the way Genua works, you guys probably know, you hit him below 50%, he pushes up, gets that rage buff. He also has immortality, which makes him super tanky and very annoying unless you stun him. And he just one-shots a lot of units. And because he's a fire unit, he automatically will target Earth units, especially in Guild Wars defense if you're fighting him on defense teams. And because of that, they gave Wukong this critical hit resistance and penetration passive for that reason. Also, this is very good in Rift, which we'll talk about in a second. But for PvP, he's a decent answer to Genua because he tanks Genua's S3, doesn't take any damage really. Even if it crits, he'll live. And because of his S3 stunning the target and also working against fire units because it ignores elemental disadvantage, you can actually just tank the S3 from Genua, because Genua's damage is mostly going to be from his penetration here. If we look, his S3 penetrates defense fully, but Immortal Wukong will actually ignore defense, which is kind of funny, by 50%. So he just tanks the S3, then he will S3 Genua, and then you basically just stun him, get him to proc his passive, and kill him the next turn. Now that's how it works in theory, but in practice, he's actually a pretty terrible counter to Genua, and that is because usually what ends up happening is you go against Genua's, right, and on defense teams, he's almost always going to be paired with Sea Phantom Politis because she can give him this rage buff without him proccing. And the thing with Sea Phantom Politis is when she S3s, what ends up happening is you end up using this artifact to give stealth to the ally with the highest attack, when you use a non-attack skill, which is their S3. And because of that, you can't really knock him out of stealth unless you have another fast opener and then actually apply this stun. And it's pretty hard to do because, yeah, you need a fast opener, but Sea Phantom Politis will actually push you back. So it makes it pretty hard to use, and also you'll need your Immortal Wukong pretty fast. And it's just pretty counterintuitive. It doesn't really work most of the time. You have to kind of pray that the artifact isn't on ML Politis. And because you can't really know unless you have someone scout, he's not really a great option to counter Genua, in my opinion. On paper, he seems like a very good counter, but in practice, he's pretty bad. Also, because Genua gets stealth, if you're using your S1 and saving your S3 for Genua, if you actually land your S1 on Genua and crit him, you can actually accidentally proc him, and then he just one-shots you. So, pretty annoying. So I think in practice, in theory, he's a good counter to Genua, but in practice, doesn't really do that well. You're just way better off using different units like, Icarina, just whatever else you use to counter those ML Politis Genua defenses. So because of that, I think in PvP he's not that great. I've tested him out so much, he just kind of is meh. He does do his job sometimes against Genua, but when you're fighting Guild Wars defense teams, you kind of want a 100% win rate team or very close to it, so Immortal Wukong really isn't that. So I think he kind of was a bust for PvP. World Arena is pretty hard to use him because he gets countered by Ravi very hard actually. So pretty hard to use him. Also gets countered by like Noggle and stuff like that, and just any fast opener. So PvP, I think he's not really that great. PvE, however, very good in hunts if you want to use him in Asmonak or Banshee, but most importantly, very good in Rift, and that is because the Rift boss does a ton of damage, ton of defense penetration. You also need a lot of AoE damage to actually stop him from buffing himself and also to debuff him. So Immortal Wukong's the best unit for that because he can sit in the front line, take a ton of hits, not die. He also has his S1, which is always AoE, which will also give him a barrier to make him tanky. And you can actually use him as a solo unit once you hit Rift Controller level 20 if you have him on a lifesteal set. So it makes him very good for Rift. The only thing is, yeah, that's all he really is good at, to be honest. And you don't want to use him on Grace of Growth because the way you use him in Rift is you want him to only S1. So you'll turn his skills off, and Grace of Growth actually makes it so that your S1 is only at +2. So you're missing out on a lot of damage. So you actually want to max his S1, max his S2, and if you only want to use him for Rift, you don't need to put anything into his S3, because the damage on this isn't that great, and you're way better off just using your S1. So for Rift, yeah, he's very, very good. Best unit there in the front line by far. You can even solo the runs with him, and he can one-shot, or not one-shot, but one-run the boss, which is very nice, and allows you to actually free up a lot of gear. He is very good for newer players who want to farm Rift, because Rift is pretty hard, honestly, and Immortal Wukong makes it a lot easier, because your front line, if you put him in the front, he'll never die, and your team will just be able to survive. And just a very powerful unit there. So, you probably are wondering, oh, is Rift really that important? Yes. Rift is the best source of gear outside of like those side story events, and because of that, you definitely want to make sure you can farm Rift. It's better than hunts because you can actually choose the sets of gear that you want. So because of that, I think Immortal Wukong, even for newer players, going to be a very solid option, because you can actually use him in Rift, you can use him in Banshee, you can use him in Azamnak, you can use him in pretty much anywhere that you need a good tank that can actually sustain himself, and you need a lot of AoE damage. So he'll be very good in Nightmare Raid as well, and even like Automaton Tower, and even like Adventure Mode and stuff like that. So I think he's a pretty solid option. You just slap him on the Lifesteal set from Abyss, and he's pretty good. And you definitely want to make sure you get him on his artifact if you want to use him or you pull him, because it gives you critical hit chance, it makes him easier to build. More importantly, it'll give you critical hit resistance, which will make it so that he can actually stack his S2 passive, and it just makes him, stack his attack and his speed quicker, so he does more damage, more sustain with the lifesteal set, more barriers, etc. So yeah, overall, I think he's a pretty cool unit design-wise. I think just for gameplay purposes though, just like a Rift bot, I tried to make him work so much in PvP and Guild Wars and Arena, World Arena, and he just wasn't doing that great. Pretty hard to use him. He gets countered by a lot of units, and yeah, his S3 isn't that useful. It does pretty decent damage, honestly. Like if you build a team comp around him, he can pop off, but you're just way better off using other carry units, right? So because of that, I think for PvE, definitely an S tier unit. PvP kind of mid, so really up to you if you want to pull for him. If you do want to farm Rift though, which is very important to do, then you definitely want to go for him because he's a very strong unit. However, we do have some summer limiteds around the corner. Most likely we'll have like Seaside Bellona running again because she's so popular. We might even have Summer Break Charlotte, who's not as good, but she's still a pretty cool unit. If you are looking for a good Fire Expedition DPS unit, she's very, very good there. We might also get Holiday Euphine back, who's not good at all, but she's very waifu, right? Actually, she was my rep hero for the longest time, and I'll put her back to it. And there's also another summer hero, I believe, that I'm forgetting. Oh, Summertime Asaria, we might get again as well. And she's very good because, one, she is very good for cleave still, for Guild Wars offense especially, and also because her artifact is very good on units such as ML Flan if you like to use her. So yeah, pretty much all I have to say about Immortal Wukong. If you don't want to pull for him, it's fine. Just keep in mind he makes Rift a lot more easier. You can do Rift without him, but I think he makes it so easy that you might as well get him. And maybe he'll get a buff in the future or something else if people complain, because he is like a Chinese anniversary unit, I believe. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below actually what you guys actually think about Immortal Wukong and how he is doing in PvP and PvE. I think PvE S tier unit. PvP though, he's kind of like C tier to be honest, just because he's kind of made to counter Janua, but he doesn't really do that. So yeah, just curious what you guys think. Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys next video.